Welcome. Welcome to the White Phoenix Archives, where we bridge the human and the numinous. This podcast explores experiences that stretch the boundaries of ordinary reality, encounters, altered states, psychedelic journeys, out-of-body experiences, and other forms of high strangeness that can profoundly reshape a life. I created this space because I too have had anomalous experiences. And when they first began, I had to navigate those waters alone. There was no one I could speak to openly about everything that was happening to me. So this podcast exists so that others walking similar paths know they do not have to face those encounters in isolation. We normalize these kinds of experiences and explore what it means to live well after reality widens, how to remain grounded, discerning, and sovereign while integrating experiences that may not fit conventional frameworks. Each guest brings their lived experience, not as doctrine or proof, but as a human story unfolding in real time. If you've had experiences you struggle to articulate, if you felt isolated, destabilized, self-doubting, or unsure how to move forward, you are not alone. The White Phoenix represents conscious rebirth, expansion without fragmentation, awakening without surrendering personal agency. And if you're looking for structured integration support, you'll find more information in the description below. If this conversation resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. New episodes will be posted on the fourth Sunday of every month. Thank you for being here, and let us begin. Welcome. Welcome to the White Phoenix Archives, where we bridge the human and the numinous. Today we have a special treat. I have someone coming back that came to my very first podcast. If you don't know him, this is Conor Sisk. I will also link down below in the description the link to our very first podcast, so you can take a look at that. But let me tell you a little bit about him. He is an experiencer whose own journey began with a childhood contact event, followed by a renewed wave of experiences in 2021. His search for understanding eventually led him to create one of the largest online experiencer communities in the world, which today we just realized has 166,000 members. For about 5 years, Conor and his team have worked to create spaces where people can talk openly about anomalous experiences, find support and connection, and begin to integrate experiences that are often difficult to discuss anywhere else. That work has also given Conor a unique perspective on the experiencer community, the conversations people are having, the patterns that emerge, and how experiencers respond when representations of contact enter the wider culture. And that's why I wanted him back today. We're going to be talking about Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day, what the film gets right from an experiencer perspective, the response it has generated within the community, and the larger question of how a major Hollywood film like this might fit into the unfolding disclosure conversation. So if you haven't watched the movie yet and plan to, please come back to this video later because we're going to be spoiling it everywhere. So welcome back, Conor. It's lovely to have you here again.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
It's always a pleasure. Cool. So let's get into it. Tell
Okay.
me about your first impression about the movie. Was there an immediate reaction for you personally? Any surprises? Was it authentic? What were your feelings on that?
Right. So, yeah, I suppose I want to give a bit of background in that. Yeah, it was very strange for me watching this movie because, you know, it's my work, so
Right?
I'm operating the past 5 years with an understanding that there's essentially, this is what I was told as a child, is what I've been seeing, there are like waves of mass activations of experiences happening this decade, and that sounds, strange to say out loud, but that essentially means is, many experiences are suddenly coming to terms with their contact this decade and are going to be seeking out community and support and all that. And various things trigger that facing of their contact, the media discussion on the phenomenon, or they'll come across a documentary or a podcast or a book or something like that, but will just force them to face their journey, or, and often then they'll actually, a contact journey will be triggered where they then realize, okay, a lot of the stuff that I've been dealing with since I was a child, or I had buried in childhood, is connected to what's happening to me now, and what seems to be connected to something that's happening on the larger scene. So with that understanding, I've been watching these waves of activations happening since 2021. Obviously they've been happening since before then. And knowing this movie's been coming out for a fair while, and knowing the effect media can have on folks, in terms of really connecting to them, to their own lives, to us via the power of story. I knew this was going to be a big trigger event for many experiencers. So I was anticipating this for a while, and I was even kind of stressed about it for a while in that sense, because it's going to be a big, lot of work, and how are they going to present experiences? How's the phenomenon going to be presented, and so on and so forth? A lot of us were thinking in anticipation with that, and concerned about that to a degree. But Steven Spielberg has a history of being quite respectful to experiencers and this phenomenon. Like he's always presented experiencers as people quite well in his media and his movies. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, of course, is incredibly special to many people. A lot of people can resonate with
Legendary, right?
yeah.
Legendary movie.
There's very much an activation in that movie for the character, and the
Yeah.
ontological shock is there, and all that stuff, and the sense of mission and journey. So that's like a lot of experiencer dynamics are covered quite well by Stephen. Like he really does listen to experiencers, right, and pays attention to this quite a lot. So I wasn't too concerned that we would be mocked, or
Yeah.
in that kind of sense. My concerns were, I also just knowing that he would pays attention to this, and obviously the people writing pay attention to this topic. There would likely be mechanics of the experiencer phenomenon embedded in this movie, and there would have been maybe concerns that perhaps some people, will be seeing these mechanics on the big screen for the first time and thinking, "Oh, this is just all Hollywood," not understanding that there's a long history of people reporting these things for decades, and so I kind of preemptively was preparing for that too. Creating kind of threads talking about experience and mechanics and so on, in anticipation that once this movie comes out, people can reference actually and read about experiences related to these mechanics that have been going back a long time. Like, screen imagery of animals and so on and so forth, and even clicking noises and so on and so forth. There might be an assumption by someone that, an image of a deer representing an ET of some kind. Oh, that's entirely Hollywood and Spielberg. No, that's been happening, and
No.
experiences have reported that deers, owl, wolves, all sorts of different birds. There's a lot of animal symbology and animal screen imagery and so on laced throughout the experience of phenomenon. And then
And
even, yeah,
I was just going to say, I remember us talking about the
yeah,
movie coming out, and I know for sure he's talked to experiences. It's very obvious they did their research, and they didn't just come up
yes,
with stuff. And some people said, well, like, is this really how it happens? So I don't know because I haven't had that kind of experience, but it is a Hollywood film. So there are certain things and certain devices that have been used to make it Hollywood friendly,
of course.
right? Because there have to be action scenes and there have to be car chases and.
Hmm.
But it certainly seemed to me that it was very true to form to what a lot of experiencers have reported, not necessarily in one person, all of those things particularly happening, perhaps yes,
Of
perhaps
course.
no, but really condensing it into those two figures. That was the one thing I wanted to say. The other thing that you and I were just talking about before we started recording is the growth of the subreddit between the time that the movie was launched and now. So there's been thousands of people that have connected to your group and have come on board. And this is one of the things you were preparing for. And it's really just gone, which is amazing.
No. Yeah, throughout the 2020s, whenever there's a new wave or a spike, congressional hearings or a media release or a documentary in some form, the subreddit experiencer subreddit has spiked in members, as people find start Googling and wanting to learn more and they end up coming across it. And of course, there was a massive spike in around this movie. The term experiencers is mentioned twice in the
Yeah.
movie, at least twice. That is significant in itself. There are many people out there dealing with contact for years and don't know the word experiencer or don't have a label to define what's happening with them, and so it's quite common actually when I meet people, they'd never heard the term before, and they now have something to kind of research what's been going on with them, a launch platform just by a term, so that's very important. I think that term is in the movie, and it was very validating to see for so many of us,
And then they can
uh,
find thousands of others who they can, share this with and not feel so alone anymore because as we know, experiencers are often very isolated.
yeah. I mean, having something to like a term to link one's experiences to that can then help them link to others, it's incredibly useful for a way for people to kind of process their journeys in many ways, So, that's often on my calls, even before the movie, when people suddenly, okay, I never heard the word experiencer before. Now I have this to research, I can connect all these dots that are underneath the umbrella of the experiencer phenomenon, because many experiencers, journeys don't involve one aspect of the phenomenon. It generally involves a lot of different, mechanics and aspects of, the
Prolonged
phenomenon.
periods of time
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah, it's very common on my like like paranormal activity being associated with NHI or ET activity. Like it's very very common that a lot of the people I would work with have only just made that connection. So they're seeing craft and they've had a being in the room, and they did not link that to paranormal activity that had been happening in their house, since they were a kid on and off, and they never realized that there was a connection, so until they come across a term experience or come across a community, and then they can basically end up consuming all the various podcasts, the various posts on our subreddit, or all the media and books and material that's been out there for decades on this stuff. And it's a big revelation to see all
Yeah.
these dots being connected. And people compartmentalize and bury this stuff quite a lot. So it's a huge deal when this is unlocked, and a movie like this certainly does that. So there's huge emotional release and re-examination of events that have gone back in their life all the way to childhood, and then even family, like as this often follows family lines, discussions with family members come up, parents, grandparents, and their experiences with the phenomenon, and then a lot of dots land in place. And that's quite overwhelming. Like it's incredibly shocking. So to have others to speak to about these things is extremely helpful regarding dealing with that kind of
Just a huge shift. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So how did it affect you? What were personally,
Well,
what were your
yeah,
thoughts?
so that's what I mean. So it's like, for example, in terms of mechanic, like, when the trailer came out, you're shown
There
the
was a
scene of,
number of trailers,
yeah,
right? A number of
yeah,
trailers that made it kind of confusing and maybe a bit eerie and, scary.
yes, yeah, like for the clicking sound. So Emily Blunt's character starts making a kind of, guttural clicking sound as she's
Yeah.
speaking, and that's shown in the trailer. It's very, it's shown to be quite a spooky thing in the trailer, of course, and that is a very Hollywoodized kind of mechanic, and yet this is the exact point I'm making, is that where did this idea of clicking noise come from? Well, guess what? It comes up in the phenomenon. It comes up in the experience of phenomenon. It's not super well known, actually. It's rarely reported, but it has come up for many decades that people have reported hearing, a guttural clicking sound coming from various different beings. Beings are often telepathic, so it's strange to hear vocal noises, but when they do, it's that type of thing that's been reported. It's variations, of course, but obviously, again, that was something that was picked up by the writers for this, and then they did the Hollywood, approach to it and all that. And so, when that came out, many experiences were having a reaction to hearing that for the first time, bringing them back to, memories and childhood and things like that. But also a concern, is this going to be a horror movie? Is this going to make
Right.
experiences look creepy? Is this going to be, so there would always be that worry, because there's a worry of, dehumanization for experiences, always, because it's something that we're constantly dealing with as is. Um, and again, I was concerned a little bit, but knowing Spielberg's history, I suspected this was just done for the trailer to get people interested. And sure enough, that was the case. It didn't, the movie treated experiences very, very well. And
Yeah.
a thread I wrote on it, I would have, I described the movie as being pro experiencer, and I did that very quickly, so that people had that sense of relief.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I
yeah.
remember we had talked about this as well for those in the audience familiar with Bashar. So Daryl Anka is a very well-known channel, and he channels this being named Bashar. And when the connection happens between Daryl and Bashar, there's often those clicking sounds.
Yeah,
So
that's, yeah.
this is not unusual, actually, for those who are familiar with those kinds of things.
It's come up in other, trance channeling work and so on as well. Yeah. Getting used to communicating through the human container
Yeah,
body, there's also some very
the
strange and
language,
weird
right?
things that can
Yeah.
happen that they get used to. Think. Um, I mean, some non-physical beings have to remind themselves to breathe when they're temporarily occupied. It's strange stuff happens in the channeling realms for sure. Um, but yeah, basically my experience of watching the movie, which was one of constantly analyzing what kind of calls I'll be dealing with and work and what mechanics are on display in the movie. So it was quite intense initially watching it, and I didn't get to really immerse into it myself and have the big emotional reactions that I normally would have because I would have incredible strong emotional reactions to anything to do with ET like phenomenon in movies since I was a child. And then post 2021, like I mean, this all became incredibly raw for me. So I was in tears watching, for example, the Aerial phenomenon documentary, which is excellent, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Anything to do with this, like rewatching, Close Encounters of the Third Kind it was literally hovering over my chair, like watching it. It was just so intense because you can really, you're seeing your bits of your life on screen. So, but I didn't have that so much this time because of just so much of what I'm thinking about all the people I'll be supporting and how the conversations that will develop from this. I did then finally have quite a strong emotional reaction myself by the end of it. That's when I started getting emotional, which was when when this is
The release.
disclosure day scene,
Yeah,
yeah, finally
yeah,
happened. And I think, examining that myself, I think it was for me, he was finally seeing, the everyday people catch up to how serious this is. Because, like when you work in this as well, every experience deals with this to a degree, but when you work with this and you deeply understand the significance of this, it's quite one of the burdens you carry is the disconnect the rest of the world has towards this, and often it's just this topic is perceived as kind of a joke or something dismissed. It's the single most important topic in human history and has
I agree.
incredible ramifications and implications for our entire species. I could go on that. I won't, but
That's another podcast.
yeah, 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 yeah. So you get stressed when you see, when you're thinking of, I'm a humanist, so I think of our species collectively and our progress, right? And when the bulk of the species look at this topic as a silly joke, that's a crisis, and you're quite stressed by that. And also, but it's, and you can't, it's very real when you're working with this stuff, so to see the catch up on screen, and see the emotions by the TV anchor reacting to the footage and everyone, finally, that's the dream everyone's had. Like finally the world catches up. And of course, if an event like that happens, human history will be marked by, the pre-disclosure, post-disclosure. It's so significant. Everything changes after that. So to see all that happen I got quite emotional then, finally everybody catches up,
Yeah.
um,
Do you
and,
think it would be like
yeah.
that? Do you think it would be like that if it came to that? I mean, I don't actually see it happening like that, in real life. But do you really think people would react in that kind of way? Because, you said something a few minutes ago about experiencers being dehumanized.
Mm.
Why do you think that is the case? Why has it been like that?
Oh, that's a huge question. I mean, the dehumanization of experiences goes back to, the Inquisition, if not before, I mean, like people with abilities or connections and so on, have been demonized and discriminated against in various shapes or forms throughout human history. And, you're either burned at the stake or you're seen as a saint, in some cases as well. Like, and, dehumanization can happen in a positive sense, and people If you know what I mean. What I mean is like if people look up to experiencers in a way like, oh, you know, you're a prophet or a healer, or can you
Right.
heal me, or can you, that's concerning too. Like that's still
Exactly.
dehumanization, you know. So, and it can flip like, you know, very quickly
Yeah.
to the negative. So, you know, I mean, obviously modern world, like, you know, the single most potentially persecuted group of people on the planet in a sense, and that experiences are not deemed to be real. Our existence is entirely denied pretty much. And if there's any basic acceptance, it's entirely seen as a mental health problem. This, you know, officially, obviously
Yes.
this is changing, but you know, people have a knee jerk reaction to dismiss, and some of that is programmed. Then, you know, a lot of people have an unconscious bias to think, right, well, I want to be seen as a, you know, an intellectually, you know. Uh, a stable person, a smart person who doesn't con by silly things, and so society deems this topic and these types of people weird and wrong, so I cannot entertain ever taking these people seriously. I have to default to just dismissing them
Yeah.
all as crazy because I mightn't look intelligent to my peers basically otherwise, you know. Oh, I'll believe it when the president announces it. I'll believe it when a saucer lands on the White House lawn. I'll believe it, you know. A lot of that extreme need for evidence and otherwise entirely dismissal until it comes is coming from a social stigma. And
That's right.
so, and then even people who are really interested in this topic, like, you know, ufologists or UFO nerds and so on, they often even discriminate against experiences because they blame experiencers as the ones that have made this topic cringy to be interested in, you know. Oh, you know, they're, which we deal with a bit too, you know. And of course many experiences we're like that, and then they have their contact experiences, and they understand, you know, and it's, you know,
So that's
so
why we
yeah,
have these kinds of podcasts. We have these conversations
yeah,
again to show people that are normal, everyday, average people, persons who just have these extraordinary experiences.
yeah,
Um, they're not any different than the average person, except for that. And my belief, and others that like you that I've spoken to over the last few months, are confirming that we believe that this will continue and it will escalate.
yeah,
So, and really throughout history, humans have been having anomalous experiences
hmm. This is part
for
of the
the
human
longest time.
experience. Yeah.
Exactly. We just label it anomalous from our own Western civilization perspective.
Mm,
Indigenous people have this all the time. They don't pathologize it. They don't make it anomalous. To them, it's normal. It's part of their everyday life. And
mm,
I know we've spoken about this before, but it's important to bring forward again that this is a bias that we have in Western culture and that needs to start to shift because
hmm.
these realities are starting to come into our world in a really big way. So, yeah,
I mean, yeah, like the discrimination against and the suppression of the experience of phenomenon, it suppresses humanity ultimately. You know, this is the part of the human experience, and what experiences are humans who are interfacing with the wider ecosystem that we're all part of.
that's right.
And so we're also classifying and gaslighting, you know, all of humanity about the nature of reality by discriminating and suppressing experiencers. So it is a collective crisis for all of us, you know, that this is suppressed now, and obviously that's um, you know, this is changing, you know, rapidly in the times we're in now. But you know, it was nice, like, you know, the one thing that the film centers around two experiencers, right? And they're
Yeah,
called experiences in the movie, you know, and one of them's a news anchor and the other is an IT security specialist. The amount of experiences I know that work in IT is actually is quite amusing. So many of those people who are like, oh my God, I'm on TV, I'm on the big screen, you know. So it's but it's, you know, but and they weren't just, you know, these characters are good people, intelligent people, and not represented as you know, complete maniacs, you know,
exactly.
or disasters as people, and all those kind of stereotypes that have been applied. You know, I mean, like we're still really suffering the wounds of old stereotypes from many years ago. I mean, you see the comments, you'll see this idea of little green men, like, you know, that's been a meme. You know, no one's really been talking about little green men even since the 40s, you know, and then this idea that it's only you know, American farmers that are, you know, and he's often said with derogatory terms, you know, that are abducted and all that, which is like not the basis of this at all. Like, you know, so it's, sometimes that's kind of talked about. I mean, but that's not be, you know, that's not been the case for a long, long time. I mean, there's been great work by people for many, many years, illustrating, you know, everyday experiences and the lives they've had. And, but, you know, the way TV had presented this stuff, you know, it's often is through you know, a cynical lens or a mocking lens, you know, in reality TV
Right.
sense. And so that didn't help, you know, but that tone has shifted, you know, we're not hearing the X-Files music anymore. When there's a news segment on this topic, and that's all very intentional.
Yeah,
And you know,
things are definitely
yeah,
shifting to the
yeah.
better. And the more of these, yeah, conversations that happen, the more that's going to change. And we'll talk later around the impact the movie has had, from what we look at in the overall zeitgeist in our cultural milieu. So did you feel it was pretty authentic? What scenes made you think,
Authenticity.
yes, that's actually true to
Uh,
life?
so yeah, like so, you know, it's obviously, like we touched on it, you know, it's a very Hollywood chase movie, this, that, and the other, right? You know, we can compartmentalize that and put that aside. And, you know, there's genuine mechanics are put in there, right? You know, so, and many scenes that experiences have lived through themselves, you know, and, so, you know, the moment with the cardinal, the bird, like, you know, so many experiences I know have had some moment where they've been had you know, a kind of a psychic interaction with an animal, or a sense that a being is projecting through an animal to them. And it may even trigger an activation, right? And combined with that, a sense that maybe if there was someone else around, them being completely oblivious to what is going on and even dismissive. So, you know, Emily Blunt's character having a very profound interaction with this little bird that flew in, and you know, it's obviously exaggerated Hollywood. The boyfriend being the asshole boyfriend, forgive me, like completely just interrupting the whole thing and shoving. So many people I know were like were going, you know, like they could
Oh,
see
don't do
themselves
that. Yeah.
that moment is represented in so many aspects of their own journeys. You know.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, like I often talk about, you know, neurodivergence in the experiencer community and
that's
experiencer
right.
population, right? And so, I mean, Emily Blunt's character reminded me of so many incredibly brilliant experiences I work with, where you know, neurodivergent, very ADD, bouncy between this and the other, but also, you know, displaying, you know, incredible gifts and abilities, you know, and so she's lively and a really lovely person, bouncing around and kind of chaotic, you know, and that is quite common for not all, but for many experiences I've
Yeah.
worked with, I recognize that in them, and it was quite like, I mean, I was smiling at, like watching her character going, I mean, she's like, so many people, so many awesome people I've worked with, incredible people, you know, and there's that dynamic then where some people around her are just seeing her as a chaotic person and not really seeing how incredible she is, and then other people actually then noticing how
Yeah.
incredible she is. And, you know, and I see this all the time too. You know, it's like people will initially dismiss an experience, oh, this person, and then the person will just say something that, how could they know that? You know, or look into them in a way, you know, and they'll realize there's something different about that person, and they have some connection in some way. Um,
But they
I
also
thought
showed
that was, yeah.
how destabilizing that
Yeah,
whole situation was, right? When she actually had that mini breakdown because she just couldn't handle it. And I thought that was
yeah,
really sensitively done. And it
yeah,
was really important to have that because it
yeah.
really shows how much pressure people can be
Hmm.
under who have these experiences
Mm.
because they're not really sure what's happening to them and they're not understood, right?
I think that's a very good point. I think one of the best scenes of the movie, Emily did a great performance, right? So, you know, the scene where, you know, there's a car chase or whatever, and they get on a train, but she proceeds to have a panic attack. And throughout the whole movie, she's in a kind of almost a manic state, and you know that's quite common post contact, right?
Yeah.
And then she has, you know, the panic attack where, like, she's exited the flow state and she's just dealing with all the trauma and faced with it, and all her nervous system is overloading. And that was an incredible performance by her during that scene. And, you know, a lot of experiences I've spoken to have referenced that scene. Many people could see themselves in that scene where they've, you know, post activation, post contact, they're in a flow state, they're learning so much, consuming so much, sharing so much, and processing so much. And then there can be hit a point where something shocks them, or they just all hits them, and, you know, in one day where they just have a panic attack. I mean, I recall myself going through a moment like that not long after, triangle craft flew over my house, you know, and I'd been dealing with all sorts of stuff above then, but I was trying to explain the shock of this to my girlfriend the next day. Like I was fine in the day it happened. It was the next day, and I went into a panic attack as I just so much all the things I know and understand about the phenomenon flooding through my mind, knowing that this thing had just flown over my house, intentionally for me to see it as well. The the ramifications, the implications. I mean, what were the beings on that craft? Look, what beings were on that? So much going through my mind in that moment. It was incredibly hard to articulate, and it just resulted in a panic attack in the moment. And that's very, very, it's yeah, that was a very powerful, very, very, very powerful scene. A lot of people reported to me today they burst into tears during that scene themselves. My reaction to the movie, of course, was very technical, up until that point. But of course, what I've heard from so many people is their reactions and activations throughout the movie, which I don't know if you want to go into that now.
Yeah,
I'll,
yeah. Let's talk about that because, one of the reasons we're
so,
doing this is
yeah.
because you have such a huge community that's been posting and discussing. Let's talk about what come out of that.
Yeah, and I work one-on-one with folks. So I mean, I'm instantly on multi-hour support calls for people processing their reaction to the movie. And so you know, there's a lot of patterns. Like so some people were feeling throughout the entire movie. They couldn't understand it. They weren't. Many people were coming in not expecting much actually, and were shocked at their own reaction to the movie. So there's a lot of people who were shocked and even confused and about their own reaction to the movie in certain scenes, and even just bursting into tears for hours afterwards. And they struggle to articulate why. They will point to certain scenes. They'll point to feeling almost like they're being pulled out of body while watching it, feeling various energetic reactions, chakras activating, crown chakra, third eye, and then they can't articulate exactly what it is that's triggered that, and just the whole energy of it. And essentially, there's something about, like, seeing on the big screen dynamics that you've been dealing with, and themes you've been dealing with in your life. Of course, it's Hollywood, right? But the themes you've been dealing with in your life, when it's put on a big screen like that, it suddenly becomes more real in a sense. And I actually saw and I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but just to kind of hammer it home, I saw that reaction in my girlfriend, who's also an experiencer. She's seen all these orbs and all that around spring 2022, and of course, she helps me in my community work as well. But she'd be hearing me talk about all the UAP files, this, that, and the other, all the stuff that's been going on. And it was roughly, I think, 2022 we saw the movie Nope, right? Which, and very different to the Disclosure Day. But there's one moment in that movie where one of the characters just starts talking about, oh, did you see the latest hearings? Did you see the files that got released? And this movie was made in 2022. I think so much has happened since then. But she just had a huge reaction to seeing a movie character basically say the things I've been saying and other people around her have been saying. It suddenly just became real, and we had to pause the movie as she kind of went into a bit of shock. Like, I can't. This is all real. This is all happening. She just had to. She had that processing moment. So with people and their personal experiences and the themes that have gone through their life with their personal experiences, suddenly that being displayed, and the energy of that, and essentially building to the sense of revelation, which many experiencers have an embedded sense that this is all building to something, and there will eventually be some revelation when the rest of us catch up to what they know. Uh, that's laced into the energy of the film, so that's kind of I really think that's bringing out a lot of them. But yeah, like the movie, like this stuff, the cardinal scene, Emily Blunt's character, so many people connected to that. Um, Obviously the very dramatic scenes with the screen memories and the bedroom scenes and all that, like people have had that, and the idea of events in childhood being covered in a screen memory, but with kind of clues dotted in that they bring for years in their dreams, potentially nightmares, but they're reflecting on it on and off for a lot of their life. Emily Blunt's character is doing that regarding the cardinal and the deer and her old, bedroom and all that, and then the re-examination of that, bringing up uh uh more, potentially even triggering more contact, and a realization that this is all real for people. Like, I mean, I'm seeing that all the time. That's captured very well. Um, the recognition of fellow experiencers that's covered briefly in the movie, and these two characters kind of recognize each other. In this case, from being on craft together, that does happen. I do know experiencers personally who have met each other on craft as children, only to meet each other later on as adults, decades later.
That's
Right, that
fascinating.
happens. Right.
Do they
Yeah,
remember when that happens, when they see each
yeah,
other? So something is triggered, something's awakened. Boom.
yeah. It's very, very big deal for when that happens. You can
Remarkable.
imagine, and they're not always from the same country. It's
Yeah.
not like they're living near each other as well. Like it was quite a shock. Um, it was a lot of people had strong emotional reactions and burst out into tears and so on around the scene where I forget the actor's name, but the main male lead is showing his girlfriend the footage of the beings being captured and beings being tortured and all that stuff.
That's when I really
People,
reacted as well.
yeah, there's a
I
huge amount of people.
ooh,
Yeah,
it was very
yeah.
moving. It was very, very nerve-wracking, very, I don't know how to describe it. There's something wrenched inside of me. There was this huge visceral reaction when I saw that. Yeah, I felt the same way.
And a lot of, like, a consistent thing that people are saying to me regarding they don't know why. Like they often say, like, I don't know why I reacted so strongly to that scene. That was one of the biggest reactions is that scene, and I don't know why. Like it's not like it's tying to a specific memory in many cases. Uh, um, but they had a very strong, very, consistently reported very strong reaction to that scene.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, some of it might have to do with arousing our empathy, towards other beings. That
oh yeah.
that we would treat other beings with such callousness and cruelty. I mean, that's, I know that most experiencers are quite empathetic. And so that would definitely trigger something. I mean, really, if you're a decent human being, that should trigger something inside of you, right?
Is that yeah? And then on the larger scale, like human non-human interactions, resulting in this type of behavior, there's the tragedy of that, and it, the tone and around how that scene is filmed, actually finally seeing beings, and like again, a non-experiencer finally understanding and seeing the situation around this. And look, there's reports, of course, for many years in ufology circles that such footage exists or such things have happened. And many experiences don't know that. Like, and they're having this visceral reaction without understanding the history of this stuff. It's very interesting. The characters, for example, Emily's character starts speaking, can start to suddenly speak all these different languages. Of course, it's
Yeah.
Hollywoodized and so on, but it's happened for folks where they would suddenly start speaking. They'll go into trance and words will come out of them that they've never heard before, and end up researching. It turns out it's ancient Greek, Sumerian, Egyptian, or
Sanskrit. Yeah.
even Irish. And then you have things like for lack of a better word, like light language. Like it's not been unusual for experiences essentially start speaking. One might say it sounds like it's in tongues, but they'll go into a trance and they
Mm.
just feel compelled to start just making noises with their mouth, essentially that a lot of people describe as essentially light language. Being compelled to speak something during a heightened energetic state, that they have no understanding of. And so, like that. A lot of folks were connecting their experiences with that, with what was going through, what was happening for Emily. Of course, one thing that is very common for, although it does show it a little bit in the movie, but with the experiences, with the sci side of the experiencer journey, what most of us, what Hollywood gets wrong, I guess, is that most experiences don't really are at the mercy of these things. They can't just turn on a gift and decide to utilize it in that moment and turn it off. Like often these things just suddenly happen and they don't understand why, and then it dissipates and then happens again, dissipates. Or this
Which
people
is why it's so
sigh.
destabilizing, right?
Yeah, 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 and hard for them to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of imposter syndrome around it too. You know, look, obviously, if we lived in a world where people were trained in these things from a young age onward and all that stuff, we might be able to, and there was no social shame around it and so on. the things might be a bit different, might be to utilize it a lot more. But but most experiencers who are incredibly psychic people, it's not like what Hollywood shows where they can just utilize their gifts on the spot. Generally, often they're basically at the mercy. Just suddenly these things happen and they're shocked by it themselves. But um, so and then of course, look, the whole childhood recovery and abduction scene was obviously going to be
Mm.
the big one for many. Um, it was hard for some folks, of course, who have the scene. The actors are certainly acting in trauma together when they're reliving that memory. That certainly brought tension. It's not shot Spielberg didn't do the horror movie approach with it. Uh, but the emotion around it and the framing of it, and like how close it is, like people do remember being carried through walls, brought through walls, and then what seems like they're going out to a house in the forest or a trailer or a diner or a circus or all these different screen memory images of things that when they're being brought to essentially a craft, um, escorted by the Easter Bunny or cartoon characters or various things from their childhood consciousness.
Yeah.
If not, animals, but generally, yeah. And
And it does appear that they
yeah,
use whatever is in the consciousness of the
yeah,
person to
oh, yeah.
make the experience softer, especially for children, to not traumatize them, to make it as gentle as possible, while still making the experience happen for various reasons.
Yeah, like on the topic of screen imagery, it sometimes seems in some of these cases it's essentially a passive operation by the being, where it's the experiencer's consciousness is interfacing with whatever process the being is doing to cover them, and it may even flick between different things, like so beings have even projected themselves as furniture. I know that sounds ridiculous, but people have woken up in their bedroom and there's a lamp in their room that doesn't belong there, and they're looking at it. And as they start to realize that this lamp doesn't make sense, suddenly the lamp starts flickering between different beings or screen imagery of different things until it lands on something, and again, tries to land on something friendly. Like, one experience, a friend of mine's partner basically woke up, saw a lamp, realized it didn't make sense, suddenly started shifting in different imagery until it landed on basically an astronaut, but with Daniel Radcliffe's face, because she liked Harry Potter, and Daniel Radcliffe is seen as a friendly guy,
Right.
and ended up being basically, walked out of the room, but that's how much is the being actually selecting this, and how much is the being just kind of like having a passive reaction to the experience's conscious to try and just find something that has the energy of friendly, like, that seems to be often kind of the case.
That's fascinating. Yeah, yeah.
And it will happen with adults. Like they'll do it with adults all the time as well, screen imagery, or they will just cover their face, so it might be a being might be in the room, but the face is shifted or shadowed, or there's a human face projected over the being's face and things like that. But yeah, the scene in the end is there's a big build up to it, so there's a lot of energy around it, like some people do remember being children on tables and craft and so on, so it was very hard, um, hard, but also very confronting and revelatory for them to be witnessing this then in the cinema,
Is that
and
one of the biggest patterns that you saw? Was that these kinds of memories were brought to the forefront for some people?
it's honestly it's not a case that the pattern would be I didn't remember my childhood abduction and then I saw the Disclosure Day movie and now I do. It's not that I'm hearing that. It's that people did remember these things. It's just that they had locked them down and they weren't facing them. So they
Okay.
basically were not allowing their consciousness to address it. They would just lock it away. And then seeing in the cinema, they just it suddenly just unlocked that and they were now putting it in front of them and dealing with it and processing it.
Yes, this really
Uh,
did happen. Kind of like,
yeah, and with all the mechanics, so not just with all of it, all the psychic mechanics in the movie, all the the whole tone of it, really, the whole thing was causing them to re-examine so much. Not everybody's necessarily a childhood abductee. Like there's many experiences who might have no memories of that, were still finding themselves having huge reactions to this. And some people have a sense that, look, maybe something has happened to me in that regard. I've had all these other experiences that indicate that, but I don't have a visceral memory of it. But they still connect to that scene quite strongly, and they find themselves now trying to examine why, um, but yeah, A lot of people basically said that they had to go and see it on their own, and they were glad they did because they were crying their eyes out through the whole thing. And then they spent about 2 hours in the car afterwards, processing and crying and being confused as to why. As I was saying earlier, like there's a lot of people are just processing why, and it brings up the fact that well, I think I now need to kind of talk about this, and that's kind of what's then happening. It's just it's causing people to really feel brave enough to face these things that they had really buried in their consciousness, and it's quite common that I've I had one person only just sort of call there the other day, and she was basically trying to explain to me that, look, I saw the Lou Elizondo, David Grush stuff, I saw La Gourmet stuff and all that. I was still having a non-reaction to it. Like even though I knew I had all this paranormal activity throughout my childhood and stuff connected to my family and all that, but I just had a lock on it all. But for some reason, I watched Disclosure Day, and it just brought up all these hidden emotions in me, and that the lock is gone, and now I'm processing this, and they can't even, like she was saying, like, I don't know exactly why this movie did that versus
Mhm.
the other things didn't. Again, I think again the power of cinema and the power of being able to kind of see, just seeing the story, like it's often many people's experiences kind of happen in the hero's journey, as talked about
Right.
before, like and so yeah, they just resonate with the whole cycle of what the characters go through in many ways, even though it's completely different in many ways. It's just they can still see themselves in the characters, and just the fact that now this is happening, it's on the main screen, and it's clearly a lot of the movie has been rejigged to kind of line up with all the various government releases and so on and so forth, and
Yeah.
certain language is put in there regarding that, but so that matched with what's currently going on right now and how then their own personal journey and revelation. But the three things like that, I think, is a big part of the energy that brings all these emotions out for folks.
I have
Um,
a couple of questions I wanted to sound you out on, see what your opinion is. First of all, do you think that Steven Spielberg had any inkling that his movie would actually cause these kind of reaction and experiencers? That's my first question. And the
Very
second
good one.
one
Mm.
is, what is it that other movie makers have missed that what's the biggest ingredient that he got right? I mean, the problem is, of course, with these movies is that they often depict alien beings as wanting to eat us, colonize us, enslave us. They're not well intentioned towards humanity. There's actually not a lot of movies out there that show beings concerned with our survival, perhaps our evolution. But perhaps it's the fact that he spoke to experiencers. Perhaps that's the biggest difference with this movie. I don't know. What are your thoughts and around the emotions that and the results for experiencers? Do you think he had any clue this might be happening?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? So, because there's two kind of things happening, right? And I gotta it's kind of separate them. As I spoke of already, the mass activation of
Yeah,
experiencers, right?
yeah,
That's happening this decade. But the other thing that's happening is, of course, the psychological preparation for disclosure that is happening through orchestrated psychological preparation for disclosure that is happening via entertainment, as well as these media releases and so on, right? And how the discussion has shifted, News Nation and this, that, and the other. Okay. It's clear, like, I mean, some of these films seemed, even rushed to come out this summer, right? And of course, there's now a whole load of releases have happened this summer, right?
yeah.
So it is clear. I reckon I can't, he'll deny it and the writers will deny it, but there's clearly orchestration involved here regarding the psychological preparation for the population to get used to this idea of seeing, the idea is embedded in people's consciousness that government will release you. We're eventually going to have a day potentially where, it's released that really is NHI and it's been covered up for many decades and all that. And, this idea is constantly seeded. And even if people laugh at it and dismiss it, if it's seeded over many, many years, when that day eventually comes, the shock is not going to be as big for the person if it's
Right.
already been embedded in their subconscious for years. And that's the idea, right? And that is happening. And I suspect there's an awareness from him that the movie was part of that process. I don't know. I mean, he's very deeply interested in experiences. I don't know how much he would be thinking. This is going to be part of an activation wave of many. I'm sure he's logically speaking, I'm sure he would be thinking, look, there'll be, since this is based on actual accounts, there will be people who will, experiencers who've had these things will see themselves in the movie in that regard, and and I think, he's treated them with care and respect, and there's lines in there that show, a sense of, experiencer rights, I could read a quote from the movie,
Yeah, yeah.
on that.
Go ahead.
Let's just see here. Apologies, I had it open a second ago. Um, yeah, like there's look the two the bad guy in the character and his ex-colleague who quit
You
to
go.
be part of this revelation. They have a bit of a dialogue. Where one is saying, "Look, we have to suppress this. This will destroy humanity if this information comes out, and I need to protect." And the other is saying, "No, you're only just protecting your own wealth and power." And then there's a monologue then where he says, there is an essential need in all of us to believe and an equal need to be believed. You violated every standard of evidence. You infantilized anyone who only wanted to understand what they witnessed. You've brutally stifled their questions, shouted them down, ridiculed, shamed, and overridden them for the crime of simply being astonished. We believe the believers and then deny a world a chance to believe them too. Look at what they are encountering the unknown, telling others of their experiences. They are starved for the truth. This 79-year terror campaign of obfuscation and lies and cover up has to end. I mean,
Powerful. So
that's
powerful.
clearly written with experiencers in mind, so there's conscientiousness to experiences all over this for sure. Whether he was seeing it as potentially activating, I don't know. But he's been fascinated by this topic since he was young, and I don't think he's ever said it, but I would not be surprised if he has had some kind of encounter with the phenomenon
A
himself.
lot of people
It's
have been
often the case.
speculating about that he's also an experiencer. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
one of the reasons he's been so interested in the subject for his entire life.
it's decent assumption. I mean, this is what happens. People have a contact experience with the phenomenon. They have a burning interest in it, and they often go off to do work that helps spread awareness of the phenomenon in some shape or form. And I don't think that's all accidental. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the deeper question, of course, which is addressed in this quote, is if there is such a thing as suppression of the truth, humanity has a right to know. Everyone in this world has a right to know the reality that humanity is being contacted by non-human intelligence, whether that's interdimensional, whether it's just physical, whether it's temporal. There's so many we don't know, or all of the above. But this is a
Mhm.
reality that needs to be out in the open and discussed and confirmed, and people need to start to understand it because we do believe this is going to come out into the open at some point. And so to prepare ourselves for what will happen after that, it's important to start to think about these things.
Yeah, reality should not be classified. It's a
Yeah,
crime against humanity to do so.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something else. Where do you think this film fits within the broader disclosure movement? I mean, we talked about trying to soften the ontological shock, but and popular culture does help people really assimilate different ideas, right? Even if it's different from in different ways than an official statement would. I think it permeates the entire cultural phenomenon, right? Like it's something that so many more people are talking about. There's congressional hearings, there's whistleblowers, there's revelations, and there's a lot of how shall we say game playing in that whole arena. It's hard to know who to trust. This is becoming a real thing in our world, and then this movie kind of drops in. The timing of it seems really important, right?
Yeah, there's everything you basically said. Like this basically slots in as part of this overall process intentionally. And it's about the normalization of thinking about these topics. As I said, psychological preparation. You could
Yeah.
call it a psyop, right? And I mean that word neutrally. Like psyop means a psychological operation to influence people's
Yeah.
psychology. I mean, this in many ways is part of the whole larger process to influence people's psychology to become more familiarized with this topic even in a foundational basis and not thus, thus again, I think again, it's holistically speaking to reduce the shock, to reduce the psychological ontological shock when one realizes this is actually real. And there's definitely clearly there's major concern from both the human side and the NHI side regarding this. And but I don't, at the same time, I think there's obviously a lot of people in certain positions that would never want this to come out. But I think this is being forced. I think there's a deadline with this in some shape or form. Hence the mass acceleration of all this. So yeah, it slots in neatly into that. As much as a lot of us here, everybody listening would be paying attention to everything that's unfolding, there is a lot of people out there that are not, even including people who are
Right.
experienced that might not even know they are. And this movie will, show up one day potentially synchronistically into their, recommended list, on their streaming service. And, sure enough, I'll be on a support call with them like 6 months later as they've gone. Who knows? They may even go on to do impact on the field. I mean, like, I've talked to Sony people. Their story starts with some initiation point. I watched
Right.
this documentary. I read this book. I heard this interview. I realized, this is real. My stuff is real. And I also need to get involved in this and help in this, that's consistent. So like, who knows the timeline effects, as this kind of starts spreading more and more, like technically speaking, I will be honest, like I'm a movie nerd as well. And the movie, it was a disappointment as a piece of art. I'll say that, but at the tool that it's designed for, it's doing its job. And again, I say designed for, I don't know how consciously, again, it was, the people behind it were thinking of the experience or activation stuff, but it'll do its job, it will cause a lot of people to start looking into these things that have never before as they just come across this movie. So, um, yeah, it fits neatly in with everything, I think it might have been rushed a bit. Um, and maybe they rushed it because there was some sense that we may get, and certainly all these releases have happened this summer.
That's right.
There may be some sense that something more would happen or may still, and perhaps it was rushed in anticipation for that. Um, um, it's certainly part of this whole process, and it fits neatly into it anyway. Yeah.
I did want to ask you about some of the scenes in there. There's a scene where I can't remember the male character's name either, but he's on his cell phone. I think she just called him, and he's standing in a field, and there's a crop circle being created around him as he's standing there. Have you come across anything like that? Has anyone?
No,
Okay, so
no, no. I
that
think
would be
yeah,
one of
that
the
was a
things.
Hollywood.
That was the Hollywood thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. That's what I thought.
I think they made that scene entirely for just to show it in the trailer.
Right.
Some scenes are in things that,
And
I mean,
perhaps to connect, crop circles to NHI because there's a lot of
yeah, oh, yeah.
speculation that
Oh yeah,
they,
yeah, 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 yeah. It's part of the mythology in a big, big way.
yeah,
I mean, the closest to anything in the field to scene like that is just, there have been experiences who visited crop circles and meditated in the center of them and just had, dealt with a huge amount of energy or some sort of experience as a result, or telepathic experience or energetic
yeah,
experience as a
yeah.
result. So you hear that idea. But no, I'm not dealing with any calls. It would be cool, if people walking into their
Just
field and
checking.
it's triggering, like people have, people spontaneously will channel, imagery and see imagery and do kind of like, like alien looking symbology and writing, and things like that. But they're not spontaneously creating that in fields. But who knows? Maybe down the line.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was really interesting. And one of the other ones was the bilocation when
Ah,
the
ah,
nefarious character was trying to mind control the main character's girlfriend. Um, I think some of that was also Hollywood stuff, but it really does make you wonder, as far as the ability, how far this would go. So, we'll get into one of the other ones after, but I wanted to ask you about that one. People have reported by location. I know that.
yeah. Like the mechanic of one being projecting its consciousness into another being exists absolutely on the field, right? Even outside of just channeling, I'll give you an example. Like, And I don't know how much people picked it up from the movie, but like, in terms of animal interactions, okay, so we have we discussed the screen memory dynamic, but in my opinion, it's absolutely the case that people have had encounters with animals, deer, and so on, where a non-human being had basically temporarily projected his consciousness into the animal to have an interaction with just usually a stare down, but like an interaction with the experiencer. The sense is, okay, I'm looking at my beings through this animal right now. Right, so they do that. That happens, in my opinion. That happens as well with experiencers, right? And experiences themselves have had again, not controlled, spontaneous moments of sometimes in sleep states, meditative states, whatever, of being in another, basically having their consciousness projected in through another experiencer and experiencing being them. I've had that experience. Now, my one's a bit different in that I had an NHI communicate information to me, and by communicating that information to me, it basically captured experiences from me in the future and other people, and then gave me the experience of being them. So I've experienced being other people temporarily for a moment, and experiencing through them, but there's no sense of no one's controlling anybody or anything like that. I do know two experiences that were practicing psi together and are practicing essentially remote viewing practices together and conscious projection practices together, and one they're thousands of miles apart, and one did they did test to see, look, can you kind of basically project into me and look through my eyes? And, but they allowed this to happen now, right? So that's the key. And the other experience who did this was able to move her arm, right? When that happened, they actually shocked the two of them, didn't know this was possible.
Yeah.
That's extremely rare. That's what people who are really training and studying and experimenting with their gifts, and also there's a permission and so on and so forth. It's not the case. I'm coming across people just suddenly having all that happen to them. But that's fascinating. The two, just that's two experiencers being able to do that with each other. So this idea can happen. The idea of, like, obviously it's very Hollywood, government using some sort of ET device to project the
Right.
spine and the eye color changing. That's not what I'm. That's Hollywood, right? But the idea, the mechanic of conscious projecting into someone else's container body and looking through their consciousness, that's happening all the time. Rare to have then, complete takeover in that. It's just a sense of looking through someone's eyes for a moment, The changing of eye color, that there has been reports in the past. I've not seen it directly myself, but of that happening in channeling. So people are doing channeling a being, temporarily eye color changing, or channeling a spirit. People have reported and that eye color change, but that's and a temporary thing. But again, I've not seen that directly. I've just heard the reports of that. But yeah, interesting that was used as a good. It was used well in the movie.
And then, of course, the other big one that I wanted to ask you about is when she's able to get into people's minds and project herself, or at least they see her as a loved one or
Yeah.
someone that deeply impacted them. Which, these are all abilities that have been examined and explored by other people in different movies or books. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so those two mechanics exist in terms of, right, NHI tend to do this, right? NHI encounters, they tend to do this where they will project a screen imagery of a dead loved one or whatever for an interaction, for positive reasons or trickster reasons and benevolent reasons, all contextual. Um, in term experiencers aren't doing this to each other or other people, but the closest would be mediums who can basically bring in the spirit of a dead loved one for communication, and temporarily in that moment, the voice may shift and body language may shift to the person's dead loved one, but it's not a case of they're Jedi mind tricking an image of the dead
Mhm.
loved one to a person. So you see it in that way. So, NHI have it's demonstrated that those abilities, conscious projection, screen imagery, and so on. But and then experiences, have mediums and so on have communicated loved ones to folks. But that's obviously everyone knows what's going on in that situation. It's not spontaneous.
Yeah,
It
and it was
can be,
definitely used
yeah,
as a device
yeah.
during the movie. And the other one I wanted to ask you about was when Hugo says about the two experiencers, it always happens in two.
Yeah, that's everybody had a bit of a reaction to that.
Yeah.
No, that seemed that's just the pure movie stuff. Obviously, we're dealing with millions and millions of experiences across the board, you know. And I
Around the
suspect,
road.
look, yeah, and I look, I suspect, uh, I kind of wonder if this was originally written to be a TV series and then got compressed into a movie. And so I think, like, that was part of, the kind of a Hollywoodization of it. That there's nothing on the field with that at all. Like, obviously there's lots of experiences out there. Um, and so you can imagine if it was a TV show, there would be probably a lot of scenes with various different experiences being
That's right.
activated and part of this whole scene and build up mission towards, the revelation disclosure, you know. Um,
And different abilities perhaps being highlighted.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think Emily Blunt's character was probably about five different characters in one, you
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. Look, in order to Hollywood, like, the needing to build an entire house in a warehouse in order to assist someone remembering a
Yeah.
childhood memory is completely off the rails, especially when they already have a device that will help them bring their memories back, regression. And the other strange plot hole is that they have an alien. That group literally have an alien that could have helped in that situation, but they hide it until they roll it out in the news station. That is, it's obviously that's pure, all pure, very Hollywood. And again, it seemed like potentially there was a different script there that had to be compressed
Mhm.
just to pull that off in a movie setting.
It's interesting
Uh,
because some people who have not had these kinds of experiences, they were just looking at it as a Hollywood movie, and yeah, they were kind of disappointed. Like it was not. I'm not really sure what they were expecting, but they didn't have the emotional reaction that a
of
lot of
course.
experiences did.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even so, there's plenty of experiences that were disappointed by the movie too. Not going to take that away. But I mean, look in terms of people fascinated by this topic, ufology folks and so on, there can tend to be sometimes a sense of oh, this new piece of media is going to have disclosure in it. It's going to have some. I'm waiting for the next chunk of info, and this movie, I'm expected to come out of this movie with some sort of new revelation. And I understand that because they're desperate for some sort of evidence and or experience that can validate their interest in this topic because there's again massive social shame on them, even unconsciously telling them that they're foolish for even caring or being curious about this topic. So, they too have this desire for everyone to catch up, so they feel less foolish being interested in it. And so there's often this like, wow, there's a big build up to this movie, maybe we'll have some sort of revelation. Oh, there was nothing. It's all the stuff I already know, and they feel robbed. But of course, there wasn't going to be real evidence of non-human intelligence in it, and also look at, like you touched on this earlier on, like, if you're covering, like the NHI, the situation that we're all dealing with is immensely complex, like monumentally
Absolutely.
complex, right? It's much
Yeah.
more complex than just space aliens. So, and it's next to impossible for a movie to try and cover the complexity of that. You need something at 2001 Space Odyssey level,
Or a whole
and there's
series,
summer,
perhaps a
yeah,
whole
sorry,
series.
yeah, yeah. The summer blockbuster's not going to pull it off. Like summer blockbusters, Hollywood is either going to do two things with aliens, as you touched on. You're either going to be the monster of the week that is mindlessly just trying to murder and chase everybody, and has no personality or sense of self-preservation, right? Or the misunderstood angelic being, of some kind. So they went with that side of it, and but there was no sophisticated conversation around NHI motivations, capabilities, and opinions and thoughts and so on. They were just kind of there, and I wasn't surprised by that. I knew that it would be impossible to try and pull off, but there were folks kind of maybe, and I understandably coming in hoping that there would be a really cool, interesting thought
Revelation
experiment in the
something.
movie,
Yeah.
or even at least represent more the complexity, the consciousness stuff, and all that from the NHI side. We're hoping to see more of the aliens and that kind of thing. And I can understand that because me in my, if in my early twenties would have probably come in with the same uh, view, So there was disappointment in that, that there wasn't really much fleshed out with the actual beings themselves,
They remain a
uh,
mystery.
yeah. There was there is a, I mean, there's some interesting comments on empathy, right? And it's true. I mean, like, you think of a telepathic species, like, uh, like you're gonna have a pure empathy for your own, because you can put yourself literally in the other being's shoes. I mean, if I've had whatever beings have interacted with me, whatever they are, they've demonstrated to me, like, I've had the experience of being someone else interacting with me. That is incredible. in terms of the idea of put yourself in someone else's shoes. I mean, I
Of course.
literally had that, right? So, yeah, our ability to be able to empathize and put ourselves in other people's shoes is incredibly important as a species. We are highly empathetic as a very social species, but we're cut off, you know, versus a telepathically capable species, and so, I think, you know, I can imagine us developing our telepathic connections, undoubtedly would be naturally become more empathetic towards our fellow brothers and sisters, across the planet, so by default, yeah, a lot of these beings would be more empathetic, at least in that context, and that being touched on, was interesting, but, um, uh, there's a few lines in there, in terms of complexity. I mean, like, there is a line in there when one of the characters says, I think, these beings are unknowable to us. Like, if you try to get to know them, but they're unknowable. They did have a couple of sentences, very fast throwaway sentence, very quick, but you have to nail in on them. That to attempt to hint at a larger story of complexity that was maybe initially intended regarding the beings.
And the whole
So that was
consciousness
interesting.
concept, right? The
Yeah.
whole idea that they are multidimensional and not just physical. And there's aspects to them that perhaps we can never understand. Perhaps they're so much more advanced. What
Yeah,
did you
they
think of
hinted at
that
it. Mm.
last line of the movie?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in terms of a takeaway from the movie, obviously I'm biased, but, like, the last line being listen, and, my takeaway from that is listen to experiencers, which is what I've been
Right.
saying for years, and many have been saying for years. But I think it's not just saying that, obviously. Um, you know, uh, um,
Were people
it
disappointed by that?
No, actually, a lot of people love that line. I mean,
Okay.
people were hoping to hear more. Like, depending, experiencers resonated very strongly with that, but,
It left the
but
door open, right?
generally, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
left the door open.
I mean, from a cinematic point of view, I knew it was going to end on something like that. Look, the beings are talking to people, using their, whispering in their ears and all that stuff. Like, these beings are telepathic,
Yeah.
So there is a lot of Hollywood going on, and, there's also, and then a lot of people miss this, okay, but there's hints at these beings being more than just ETs in the movie. The primary one is when the tall grey type being is coming out of the capsule that is rolled in. It's rolled in this capsule. The capsule opens, and then there's a shot then of the being standing up. And the way the capsule is designed is to emulate angel wings behind the being's shoulders. And I saw what Spielberg was doing with that shot, but that has not been picked up on by many people. But that's a one little kind of hint in cinematic framework that he's trying to imply that there's more going on than just aliens. So there's little moments of that, but again, it seems rushed, in that regard. But yeah, listen, like, again, touching on the empathy thing, and but also, I do think, yeah, I do think people, listening to experiencers is incredibly important, because if you really want to know what's kind of going on with this, like, a lot of people have a tendency to, and only listen to what the government and government whistleblowers are saying and military whistleblowers are saying. If you really want to understand this phenomenon, you want to really be listening and paying attention to the people who are engaging with it. And I understand there can tend to be a sense of, like, because people want the whole story, like almost like an exopolitical thing. When you start only looking at it from that point of view, you're going to see all sorts of contradictions on the field and all that, and it can, like, give you that sense of I need to pull away. I think, you need if you listen to what's happening to experiences and the various mechanics of contact, and what those mechanics reveal about the nature of reality. That's where a lot of this importance is. Non-human intelligence exists as interacting with us. That's revelatory on its own. Then the psi mechanic, the conscious mechanic, as we were discussing, absolutely major implications for the nature of reality. Then all the other things, like, being pulled out of body, and being able to engage with beings in dream states and so on. Like, there's so many things that are important and intrinsic to the human experience that the experiencer phenomenon itself illustrates, and NHI experiencer interactions illustrate, that
That's
are
right.
very important for us as a species to know. So I think look at the mechanics and stop only looking at this for, like, I'm comparing massive exopolitical stories that certain people are sharing. It's mechanics and what that means for our existence here as humans. That's huge. This is huge stuff, and so we can get there first, then we can get on to the big exopolitical
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah, it's just that people really focus on the nuts and bolts of the entire UFO UAP question, And I'm sure that's because these are things that are seen in physical reality. What experiencers report is a personal experience that can't be validated, can't be measured, can't be quantified or anything. And so there's much less desire to explore that because there's almost like a fear. Like sometimes I think there's a fear to include experiencers in the conversation because
Mm,
where would that take us?
yeah,
And
yeah.
yet, as you say, the experiencers are the ones who are having contact. They're
Hmm.
already, for them, there's for some people, there's already been open contact with these beings
Hmm.
in so many different ways. There's such a variety of ways that they connect.
And if you're trying to understand NHI motivations and intentions, like ignoring experiences is a massive failure. You can pick up a fair bit of, it's clear. So like there's this idea that like, oh, the beings don't want disclosure, like yet they put massive amount of effort into personally disclosing to individual experiences and then encouraging them to go on and
Talking about it.
push this topic further down
Yeah,
the field.
yeah.
That you're seeing NHI intentions and motivations there, there's such patterns on display within the experiencing phenomena that are incredibly. They reveal a lot about this stuff, but it's just ignored a lot. But it won't be forever. Yeah.
That's what we have to look forward to. What do you think Spielberg missed that he should have had in the movie? Did he miss anything important?
Oh, I mean, again, look, again, well, we touched on it. I think there's only two people as experiences. Yeah. Um, I mean, like, I have to, because they had to Hollywoodize it, I do understand. I don't like miss like how would he have included this, that, and the other in it? Um, well, like, again, even they didn't engage in the conscious telepathic aspect of these beings, or even the, in much mechanics on the interaction with the beings and the experiences themselves. Um, it would be nice to have seen a little bit more of that, and but I think really just. I wish it was we miss in terms of more artistically poignant.
Oh, talk a bit about
If I just wish it was as if like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind is both a love letter to the experiencers and the experiencer phenomenon in many ways, and an incredibly moving movie, an incredibly excellent movie in all shapes and forms. It has the Spielberg magic and the John Williams magic and all that stuff, and I didn't pick up that. I don't know if John Williams did the music in Close Encounters, but John Williams and Spielberg worked on this movie, and yet can anyone come away from that movie humming a classic John Williams melody? No, and is there any is there any like jaw-dropping shots and like there's it just didn't have the magic, the movie making magic that one would have hoped to make it actually if this was like just an excellent movie all around as well as an experience or love letter as it was the impact would have been so much more broad in many ways but so really I just wish it was technically speaking a better movie instead of it it's really just it's kind of almost like it's just it was just really designed to deliver information to to the public at large, and so the art suffered there, I feel, and I would have liked to have seen it to be, I imagine it was even better than Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and had everyone in the cinema was moved, experiencer or not, I think that would have been, it would have been beautiful to see. So I'm more thinking in those terms, just like to be able to squeeze all the like the mechanics of the experience found into a movie like that. I wasn't expecting that. I was happy enough that he'd covered so much as was. Like some of it was, I didn't like how they did the clicking stuff and all that with Emily Blunt's character and all that again. But there would have been other ways to do that. But
His focus was really
yeah,
different in this movie, wasn't it? The focus was really on the experiencers and how it can play out in a human life. Whereas it feels to me like Close Encounters was more about the big picture of it all. And I mean, obviously he had experiencers in there as well, right? Because the main character was so driven to go to what was it called, the Devil's Tower,
Mm,
and he was obsessed with it, doing his mashed potatoes. Like everybody remembers the mashed potato scene because it was so powerful, right?
mm.
But you're right. I mean, when the ship came over, it was rising over that tor, and you just saw it, and the music was playing. It was incredible. I watched it recently, actually, and it moved me
Mm.
emotionally, that whole scene. I think what he did here, and this is just my opinion, it was almost like, wake up, people. This is happening. These beings are interacting with us for a really long time. This has been hidden for a long time. Maybe we haven't treated them very well either, right? Which was the torture scenes and that, which was so disturbing. But they are still with us, and they are trying to help us, guide us, inform us. It seemed to me like there was a different focus. What do you think?
No, no, I very much agree. No, no, very, very much agree. Yeah, yeah, and the focus, of course, was also this idea of releases in the media. Like, I mean, if you saw the end scene emulates very much the type of footage we're seeing now, but what that footage eventually turn into. It starts with, like, moving dots and all that, but then eventually it's actually a big ship and this, that, and the other. We're kind of, what's being cut out of all the footage that we're being released is like in the movie finally, and it's like, so. So it's very much designed to be of the time we're in and match with what's going on in real life in that regard. So it's very technical in that regard. I mean, he did do that. Like, he in Close Against the Third Kind, he was studying, like, a lot of the scenes and stuff in it is based on lore, and reported encounters, Holloman Air Force Base landing, even the police car, like, driving off the side of the cliff. Like, there's famous reports back in the day of people chasing a police car, actually chasing a craft, and being so dazzled by it, they drove off the side of a road and that kind of thing. So and the experienced mechanics are incredibly deep within Close Encounters as well. Even the Jacques Villay character asking him
Yeah.
about, is he, even does he a sunburn and hives and things like that, like autoimmune issues, and there's a point where he's grilling him in the room.
That was a stroke of
Um,
genius
yeah,
to have this character, like, to represent Jacques Vallée. That was definitely
yeah,
genius.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that it surfaces now. What do you think has changed in the experiencer community since you started it like 5 years ago? What are some of the trends that you're seeing? What has changed?
I mean, if in the past 5 plus years, there's been, I think, more normalization and acceleration of this topic than there has been the past 60 plus, maybe, in many ways. At least, so it's just as I've said, there's consistently more and more waves of people activated and waking up, and they're simultaneously dealing with look what's happening on the media, look what's coming out in the news, and the normalization of this. So um, yeah, I get you. There's a sense of unprecedented times. And when people are activated and suddenly dealing with the phenomenon, they don't stop being, they don't go back to not being a non-experiencer. So it's one thing, like, so when you're outside of experiencer circles, but you're also deeply embedded and fascinated with this topic, there can be a sense of burnout. There's obviously burnout for experiencers too, but burnout with okay, I'm being teased with disclosure all the time. I think this is, where is this
Yeah.
going, or is this going anywhere, or is it all just BS or whatever. But when you're in the front row seat to all these activations and dealing with experiences, there's a constant build up. There's a constant stepping ladder that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That doesn't go away. Like, so sometimes you'll talk to someone who will say, "Oh, they're gonna put the cat back in the bag again." We're gonna
That's
cancel
not possible.
disclosure or whatever like that. Like, but it's this clearly this is not going to go away. This is going
No.
to keep getting bigger, and the more people who and especially with the experiencer population is basically multiplying rapidly.
Mhm.
And they're already experiences. They're just now coming. They're first facing or coming out of the closet and all those different things. So that's just basically just, I'm constantly just seeing, I knew all this was going to happen because of my experiences before, but I'm just basically watching everything that I've known was going to happen. And, more celebrities are going to come out as experiences and or make this topic part of their work, and that's just going to keep happening more and more too,
Well,
so this
Demi
is something that's,
Lovato, right? Like Demi Lovato, she's one of the people who's come. She's an
oh, there's loads, like there's
yeah.
tons of celebrity experiences. And I get, but I then even like Dr. Phil in the United States is now talking about this topic, like, and this again is orchestrated in some regard because, like, a figure you've seen on TV for decades, love him or have whatever opinion of him you'd have, talking about this topic like it's normal has a massive effect on people's conscience, even if they think they don't believe it. They still has an effect whether they know it or not. So that's it's constantly this is escalating. So it's just the patterns are just constant. New waves activated every year or two. And then dealing with that journey. And I'm constantly expecting, anticipating the next one. So it's just the population is just constantly growing with it. Um,
Do you
yeah, like,
find a difference? Anything's changed in the actual experiences themselves? Is there a different pattern that you've noticed over the years, or has it been the same as always, like all sorts of different things for different people, or multiple things for people?
it's multiple things for people for sure. I mean, the consistent pattern I've mentioned, I think before, is orbs. There's just a subsection of experiences that are having have whatever NHI they're connected to, engage with their experiencer on the ground, if you will, via consistent orb and or craft sightings and
Exciting.
interactions, right? And that is happening at a much larger scale
Hmm.
than people realize, right? It's not just people like Chris Bledsoe. It's not just me. It's not just this, that, and the other famous military person. It's not just psionic assets. It's not just Skywatcher. There's a lot, millions, in my opinion, of everyday experiencers whose beings are, going through incredible logistical effort to illustrate to them, like, we're here, we're real, and we're watching over you throughout your life by flashing lights or orbs at the, in extraordinary circumstances consistently, throughout their life. Like that is happening at a massive scale, more than anyone seems to understand. And I feel like I need to kind of highlight that more in my work. But, um, I don't think that was always the case. I think this is kind of relatively new. I mean, I don't think these things are brand new, but I think that modality is escalated. But it varies. Well, of course, contact varies quite a lot. And I would not sit here and say everyone dealing with craft and orbs consistently are even necessarily all dealing with the same beings. I don't know that, and the mechanics are slightly different there too, when you talk to a lot of those people. Um, but yeah, like, I mean, again, it's like you're having spiritually transformative experiences, and then you're also having experiences that can shift and vary between like your kind of traditional ET like experiences to very, mythological, kind of experiences, and then religious and spiritual like experiences. And one individual experience you could potentially have all of the above. Um, so it's very interesting in that regard. Uh, yeah,
So that pattern hasn't shifted. It's just become more
just
people are having,
escalating.
yeah,
Yeah.
escalating. So just a really personal opinion, and of course we're always speculating. What is your opinion as far as why these things are escalating? What do you think the beings, whoever they are, or whatever's doing this, the phenomenon, what is the purpose of escalating this contact experience?
Mhm. Well, I can only imagine
Speculate, right?
it is building up to some form of disclosure, right? When, I don't know. The people who are suddenly dealing with their experiences and processing them now, like this is intergenerational as well, generally, right? I see, a lot of those people will be guides to their children as they deal with contact, and which is it seems to be quite unique to this generation in many ways. And that, like, most experiences I talk to around my age and all that, like, their parents struggled to have any kind of decent conversation with them about this stuff, or they feared it, or it was looked at through a very specific lens, or so on. Whereas then this current generation, they're processing it, they're dealing with, they're coming to terms that it's destigmatized. They have a very neutral, balanced, discerning, and vigilant view as well. And when their children want to open up to them about this phenomenon, they're going to have a well-trained, if you will, experiencer parent to guide them, in a world that is more and more every year normalizing this topic. So I'm constantly just thinking of where we'll be. And, even if things are in 20, 30 years time, you're talking about like the experiences of children now, where are they, what are they going to be like? What world are they going to be in when they're in their 40s, and what type of experience will they be having grown up in a much less, with this more normalized and less shamed, like so many people I know are adults of all ages, like, people are being activated and waking up in their 70s and in their 20s, right? And everything in between. And they're suddenly realizing they have gifts and abilities, and suddenly realizing they have beings in their life, and, they're having precognitive experiences and all that. And, imagine they knew all this for sure and didn't have to go through all the unraveling of imposter syndrome. Imagine they all knew all this since they were young, and they could talk about it openly with their parents whenever they
And
wanted to,
embrace it, right?
and
Embrace
they're
it.
seeing it on the news. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a normalization of this topic, and an activation of mass experiences. And then they also experiences will be people will eventually turn to when they realize this stuff is real. And okay, my friend this past few years has been saying this, that, and the other. He seems to know a lot. Maybe I'll actually go to them. So experiences may have a role of trying to like reduce the fear and kind of communicate the reality of this stuff to the people around them and their families and social circles, when those people can no longer deny and gaslight themselves even that this is real, when if some kind of revelation happens, or more smaller ones build up to a bigger one, or so on. So, I mean, I can't help but see that this is a build up. It's certainly a build up happening,
For sure.
right? And it's like, so it's not happening for no reason. So I have to assume we are going to see potentially potentially in a lifetime, maybe even way sooner, that this topic will get, revealed. A disclosure day may
Right,
happen.
right. Perhaps not all in one day, but
Yeah.
actually really big steps towards this becoming more normalized. Final question. What is the one takeaway you hope people leave after watching this film?
Well, I mean, I listen
Especially,
to experiencers. Yeah.
right, maybe the takeaway for non-experiencers.
Well, I want them to listen to experiences. I mean, that is the huge one for me, honestly, though, is, I mean, I am quite biased, of course, experiencer advocate and all that too. But, yeah, like, look, I can't peel myself away from it. A lot of people, it was really interesting. Like, a lot of people, and it happened to me too, they suddenly had friends and family members reach out to them for a conversation after they watched the movie. Right. So that, people who avoided those conversations historically now wanted to actually talk to the experiencer in their life. And that's very powerful. That's very, very, very powerful. Right. Like look, I, I hope people. This is obviously, people can be very cynical and nasty, and they're gonna try to do if they do your own research into this, like look at what experience has been saying. Like some people have already said that, oh, when they saw an experiencer sharing a certain mechanic, oh, you just got that from Disclosure Day. I mean, come on, like it's out there. Now we have ChatGPT and everything. Now it's not that hard to look up whether certain mechanics have been long reported for many, many decades before this movie came out. So, do your, show some grace, towards people on this, um, and, we just try to look, I'm sorry, I'm just going to just listen to experiences for God's sake. Really, really, that's the big takeaway. Um, yeah, yeah, like, I mean, yeah, um, I hope it just gets people to start kind of deep diving on this, really. I mean, the movie, again, like it doesn't have a sophistication representation of NHI and so on. As we know, it's much more complex than just space aliens. And so I hope that they can kind of uh, understand to look into that aspect of it too when they do start listening to experiencers and examining this. But yeah, it is, like, this is important. Like, this, it is important for us to understand that this is happening in our reality. And hopefully that, have a mature reaction to this and not, demonize experiences or all non-human beings. It's a complicated situation out there,
It's complex,
yeah.
definitely. Do you think people will look back in the future and just look at this as another sci-fi film, or do you think there'll be something different that will happen?
I think it's an inevitability that this film will be looked at as part of a process of revelation towards disclosure one day in some shape or form. Uh, Without a doubt, will be looked at. This time we're living in right now. If everything goes the way I think it's going to go, in 200 years' time, people are going to be looking back at this time as the build up to a major revelation. It's going to examine it. It's going to be quite interesting to see historically how humans were building up and dealing with the build up to this major revelation. Everything is going to change once disclosure happens. So in the years building up to that, will be examined historically. Like there's the experiences are sharing on my subreddit, the conversations are happening already. One day the future is going to look back on all that. It's going to be interesting, especially, with the way AI is going and all that. Like it's going to be important to see genuine people sharing uh, before the world had admitted that this is real. And I do think also that it's important to say, like, once some sort of admission to this as being real happens officially in some shape or form, there are going to be a lot of there's going to be the potential is there for people to pretend to be experiencers or
Mhm.
try to be implant themselves as experiencers for some sort of reason or goal. And I think the people who've been sharing about this stuff when it was socially taboo should be given a bit more credit than the people who just suddenly show up and say their experiences after the taboo has drifted, as if they've no history of talking about this. So I think about that too. I think people will look at those of us sharing when it's very socially unacceptable to do so as being the genuine real deal, and there might be more doubt on who's a real experiencer or not in a post-disclosure environment where it might be politically advantage, there might be an advantage in some regard or
Yeah.
an agenda behind portraying oneself as a contactee or an experiencer. So I think about that too, as well. Uh,
This
yeah.
certainly feels like a threshold moment, right? And this film is part of this threshold moment that we're living in, which seems to be really shifting all the time, and again, gaining speed and momentum. Yeah,
We're living through a paradigm shift. We're literally
we
living through a
absolutely
paradigm
are.
shift. And we're front row seat to it as experiencers. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Connor. It's been
Thank
a
you so
lovely
much.
conversation. Lovely conversation. So thank you for spending this time with us on the White Phoenix Archives. If something in this conversation stirred a recognition or a widening, a question, a remembering, screen memories, whatever it might be, just allow it to settle gently, because these kinds of experiences that stretch reality can be disorienting, but they can also be deeply transformative when they're met with steadiness and care. If you are navigating this terrain and seeking support, you'll find more information in the description box below. And just know you're not alone in this. And if you liked this conversation, please like, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. Until next time, walk your path with clarity, discernment, and trust in your own sovereignty, and rise in your own time as the White Phoenix. Thank you.